Hello ladies, gentlemen, and persons in between. My name is Tim Snowborn, and today we're going to go on a nice cemetery tour for this episode of Serious Issues. So, what happened here is, over the summer, I went to Lakeview Cemetery here in Seattle and just walked around. I like cemeteries. I'm interested in them. Not in a weird way, just sort of a cultural, philosophical sort of way. I'll explain in the original intro that I'm going to include here. I went back a few times to get all of my thoughts and feelings on everything that I saw there, and I've edited it all together, and it comes out to about 3 episodes worth. And since it's months later now, I'm just going to sit here and record intros and outros to each episode. So I hope that you find cemeteries as interesting as I do, because here we go. Hello ladies, gentlemen, and persons in between. My name is Tim Snowborn, and today I thought we would just take a nice, relaxing stroll through Lakeview Cemetery. I'm interested in cemeteries, not in a gothy, emo kind of way, more in a philosophical, cultural perspective. I like hearing about the different beliefs about what happens to us after we die. I like hearing about different burial methods and rituals. It's all very interesting to me, so today I thought we'd just go on a little cemetery tour. Come along. I wanted to show you something interesting I noticed about the tombstones in this particular portion of the cemetery. I was walking over here and I noticed that, there's a variety of different types here, but there's a lot of them seem to be fairly uniform in size and shape. There's a lot of very similar tombstones here, like an unusual variety. And I noticed that they were all closer together, and I couldn't figure out why until I got up to the end here and turned around. All of these are all Asian headstones. These are all Asian families. I don't know if it's divided up into like this. Over here is the Japanese section, over here is the Chinese section, over here is Vietnamese. I don't know if it's separated like that, but all of the tombstones in this section belong to Asian families. It's sort of interesting to me that even in a city of the dead, there's a Chinatown. Cemeteries are called cities of the dead. I went on a cemetery tour in New Orleans, and that was what they called them. And the reason I think they're closer together is because, at least in Japan and Korea, which again, I taught English there, in Japan and Korea, they tend to cremate their dead. I don't know if that's true all over Asia or just the ones I've been to, but they tend to cremate their dead, and so they take up less burial space. And some of them, this is if they even want a headstone at all. One thing I like to do when I come to these cemeteries is I like to find the person who died the youngest, and the person who died the oldest, and the person who died the longest time ago, and the person who died the most recently. Although this is a very big cemetery, so I doubt we'll actually find the winners of all those categories here. This whole thing belongs to the Duthie family. See the corners there? That whole plot is very sectioned off. And then to the left here, we have the United Confederate Veterans. This is a monument to all the Confederate soldiers. From Seattle, or no, not from Seattle, from Washington? I don't know. Interesting that they have this. Rhodes here has an entire mausoleum to themselves. I sometimes wonder about the people who have something this big versus the people who just have like a plaque in the ground. Do you have something this big because you want to feel important, or because you were important, or because you were wealthy? I think War Machine's buried in there. For example, over here we've got Daniel John and Eunice Williams with just a plaque in the ground. Now, I don't think that necessarily means that they were poor, although I'd be willing to bet that Rhodes there was indeed rich. This is something I've never seen before. The Kahlers have a sarcophagus outside of a mausoleum. I would expect to see something like this in a mausoleum, but out here by itself seems odd. Now here's something I don't recall ever seeing before I came to this cemetery, and yet they have lots of them here. These perfectly cylindrical headstones. I wonder what that's all about. Oh look, the last name is Snow. George E. Snow and Ray D. Snow.
And then to the left over here, we have the Lee family with a bunch of pretty fresh flowers on the grave here. I don't know if they come back every year or if this person just died. Oh, if you look, I don't know if you noticed, you can see this person just died. So I just realized that over there on the other side of the fence next to the cemetery is a playground full of children. It's an interesting juxtaposition, I think. Over there, everyone's young and alive, just starting their lives. Over here, everyone's dead, and it's over for them. Makes you think, huh? Wow, you'd think the Hilton family would have a whole mausoleum all to themselves. Or at least a more impressive headstone. Here we have the winner for the most unfortunate name I've found so far. Freeland. Now here's a name I'm surprised I've never heard before. You'd think some hardcore nationalist would have his name legally changed to that. Baby Woodruff, 1920. Another cemetery I went to had, like, all the babies were buried in the same section. I just suddenly came across a section where all the headstones only had one date on them, or the baby had died the next day. This one apparently was buried with his family. Haven't found the baby section of the cemetery here in Lakeview. Sprinkle. Still not as unfortunate as Sweat. I don't know the name for this kind of thing, where everyone's buried together in a great wall like this. I suppose now would be a good time to tell you what I learned about cemeteries in Louisiana. So I went to New Orleans a few times when I was stationed on Fort Polk in the Army, and I got a tour of one of the cemeteries there, and it was the cemetery that they use in all the movies. Whenever there's a movie that needs a scene in a cemetery in New Orleans, that's the cemetery where they film it, because of Easy Rider. When the movie Easy Rider came out, the local archdiocese saw it and declared that Hollywood could not film movies in any of their cemeteries anymore in New Orleans. The cemetery that I was in, the one that I got a tour of, was the only one that wasn't owned by the archdiocese in the city. So that's where every movie that's featured a scene in a cemetery in New Orleans since then has been filmed in that cemetery. So cemeteries in New Orleans are different than they are in the rest of America because the city is below sea level. So they tend to bury them in crypts. I haven't found one here, really. Well, there was one that looked kind of like those. Anyway, they would bury some of them in walls like this one. The way it worked is they would bury them in these little crypts and leave them in there, leave the bodies in there for a year and a day, because it gets so hot in New Orleans in the summer that over the course of the year, the heat cremates the body inside the crypt. And after a year and a day, they open up the crypt and sweep the ashes and bones into an area below the crypt called a caveau, which is the French word for cave. And that is how they're able to get entire families in one little crypt, because everyone is cremated inside it and swept under the crypt afterward. This is the Stetson family plot. A couple of interesting things I want to point out here. Up at the top there is a half-covered urn. I remember hearing on the cemetery tour in New Orleans, I remember hearing that a half-covered urn indicates a statesman, I believe, a great statesman, or perhaps a soldier, I want to say. I think it's a statesman, or maybe it's one of the oath, maybe it's both, or either. Anyway, and then also, look at the dates on these kids here. 1862 to Lizzie, 1862 to 1863, Ernie, 1868 to 1869, and Carrie, 1874 to 1875. The Stetson family did not have good luck with kids. That's unfortunate. It's a very nice poem down here, though. Little feet no more shall wander through this wicked world of care. They have gone to meet their Maker in their home forevermore. Not lost, but gone before.
Alright, that's it for episode 1. Question for this episode, what kind of send-off do you want after you're gone? What kind of music do you want to be played? What song do you want to be played as they're lowering you into the ground? Thank you for joining me for this conversation. I hope you liked it. I look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments below. If this is your first time on my channel, welcome. I'd love to have you subscribe and join me for future conversations and check out my other videos for more. Until next time, everyone, may your enemies all die under embarrassing circumstances and be buried in shallow, hastily dug graves.